The U.S. has been applying a lot of pressure to Iran, withdrawing from the nuclear deal last year, also reimposing sanctions. Have you seen any sign that this pressure is pushing Iran to renegotiate with the U.S.?
Things are much worse for the Iranian people, and we're convinced that will lead the Iranian people to rise up and change the behavior of the regime.
So that's what you're hoping, that these sanctions are going to help push the Iranian people to rise up against the regime and overthrow it?
The sanctions are designed to deny them the wealth and resources they need to continue to create havoc throughout the Middle East.
President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft, no shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here.
It's very important for people to understand what they've just seen. I really appeal to New York Times reporters who write incorrectly or dishonestly every single day, to Washington Post reporters, to Wall Street Journal reporters, to MSNBC, to others reporting, to look at what Mr. Bessent explained. The United States used economic warfare to create chaos in Iran. He explained it clearly. It started a speech where he said, I think the Iranian currency will fall. That is the first step of trying to get people to flee from the currency to create a self-fulfilling collapse or panic. Then he explained that the Treasury and its office, OFAC, which enforces these sanctions, put sanctions on institutions around the world to stop doing any kind of business with Iran. Absolutely normal legal business. The idea was that Iran would not be able to export its products, not to be able to engage in international trade. This is warfare. Secretary Bessent said that this worked. It worked brilliantly, he said. By the end of the year, banks had collapsed, the currency had collapsed, and therefore people came out onto the streets. Not one of our mainstream media accurately reported any of this. They all reported the official propaganda of the U.S. government that people came out on the streets to protest the mismanagement of the Iranian regime. This is simply a game. Of course, it's a game where you need to know something, and our reporters are generally either ignorant because they're not paying attention, they don't do homework, or they're guided by their editors who are in cahoots with the CIA, with the Treasury Department, with the White House, because that's how they get their stories and their sources. And so the most basic fact of what happened in Iran in recent weeks was that the United States used economic warfare to destroy the Iranian economy, and it continues to do so. And Mr. Bessent said, it's all going in a positive direction. Then he had that fleeting little smirk on his face. The goal is regime change. The goal is that the New York Times will dutifully report that the people rose up against their terrible government without mentioning anything about the economic warfare by the United States. Absolutely illegal, absolutely disastrous, crushing the lives, the livelihoods, the health, leading to deaths on mass numbers, we know from these sanctions that have been used by the United States in this way in many countries to destroy other countries. Venezuela is another case of this.
What you started with were very legitimate protests about the economic conditions in Iran. Those overlapped with a struggle, political struggle, between reformers and conservatives. This then was developed into a CIA, Mossad, MI6 operation with the introduction of thousands of these Starlight terminals, enormous quantities of money, which in that setting, of course, is going to buy a certain amount of support. And now we have all sorts of evidence that's being provided overseas as well as here at home for instructions given to people in the crowds to fire on the police and provoke the police to shoot back at them in the hopes that people would be killed. And this then would worsen the situation. Well, all of this unfolded and it failed.
The idea of these agents on the ground there, it's not going to be the men and women who work at CIA headquarters, MI6 headquarters, Mossad headquarters, people who are Israeli, British, Americans. These are Iranians, whether they are Kurds or Baluchs or Persians or Turks or Sunni, Arab Iranians. It'll be a blend, but these are agents that are utilized by the intelligence services to carry out their bidding. And to your point that I didn't get to about whether or not they would directly kill innocent civilians. Absolutely, that's all to stoke the outrage, to provide the context, to give the casus belli for an American intervention in Iran. I mean, it seems as this has been long planned for. This is obviously the culmination of efforts that began months and months ago, maybe even a year ago, with Netanyahu's first visit to Iran.
Trump is a killing machine in that regard. And let's not forget what he's doing right now. What they've been doing, they being Mossad, principally, but CIA and MI6, all backed by Donald Trump and his money. What they've been doing in Iran is acting as if they were Iranian citizens and killing Iranians and burning and pillaging and plundering. It's 1953 against Mohammad Mossadegh on steroids and on high technology provided mostly by the United States and Israel. That's what this protest in Iran has been all about.
More than that, you have Israel's Mossad on its official Farsi Twitter X channel telling Iranians at the onset of these protests, before they morphed into violent regime change riots, that they were walking alongside them, that there were Mossad assets in the protests. This was also repeated by former CIA director and ex-Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who said Mossad agents are walking beside you to Iranian protesters. And it was repeated on Israel's Channel 14, a pro-Netanyahu channel, by the Israeli correspondent Tamir Morag, who said that not only are Mossad agents active, but they are funneling weapons into these riots and are responsible, in his words, for the many body bags that are piling up in Iranian morgues. We have to ask why. Why did these protests turn violent? And what is the agenda here? What is Israel's agenda? What is Pahlavi's agenda? The agenda is to get Trump to bomb Iran and force and manipulate Trump and the United States into a conflict from which they cannot extricate themselves, which will be financially ruinous for the global economy.
I mean, the reality of the Iranian economy crashing like it did at the end of December has very much to do with the British, the French, and the Germans putting those snapback sanctions onto the Iranians back in the fall. These were draconian sanctions that did exactly what everyone expected those sanctions to do: crush the Iranian economy, devalue the Iranian currency to nothing, to Weimar Republic level meaningless. And that, of course, then engendered the public unrest that enabled the CIA, Mossad, and MI6 to put into operation their regime change. And I think what happens this past week, part of that regime change operation was to have been American strikes to decapitate Iranian leadership, military, security, political, religious. But what occurred was that the Iranian government was resilient enough, the Iranian people resilient enough to realize what was occurring,